Can you imagine trying to follow someone in a place like this, where anybody, particularly a stranger, would be immediately obvious? Operation Klondike unfolded in exactly this sort of wild and remote country, the Highlands of Scotland, where the landscape and the tight-knit community made a difficult undercover job almost impossible. As you'll see, customs officers were forever trying to piece together leads, and often found their investigation leading them up blind alleys. It's a story full of twists and turns and red herrings. What made it worse was that an enormous amount of drugs was at stake, and behind it all, a well-organized and sophisticated drug runner, a man we've called Neil Weston. We've reconstructed what happened using actors.
The Highlands has a coastline of over 4,000 miles in length. It's sparsely populated and numerous coves, potential landing sites. These are all act as a natural magnet to the discerning drug smuggler.
We have protected the identity of the undercover officer in this operation.
It first started from a telex that we received in Glasgow from the Spaniards, saying that there was a Scots guy in the south of Spain called Weston who was about to import into Scotland 4 ton of cannabis. Unfortunately for us, the information came about 2 or 3 weeks too late, and we'd missed it. Weston probably had a financial stake in the drug consignment, but it probably wasn't all of his. It would have been financed by people in the south coast of Spain, probably London criminals who stay out there. It was probably their drugs. But when we started digging into Weston's past, we managed to piece together half a dozen people that we had a fair idea were involved.
One of those people was an experienced sailor and diver who lived in Ullapool in the northwest of Scotland, a character known as Crazy Chris Howarth.
You know what's the matter with you? No bottle, no vision, that's why you're stuck here.
In a lot of rural communities like that in Scotland, there are a lot of drugs about, and there was a lot in Ullapool. If anybody was to take a poll of the Ullapool residents who would have been involved in something like this, I think Chris would have been in the top half dozen.
But keeping watch on anyone in a small town like Ullapool, particularly someone like Chris Howarth, wasn't going to be easy.
We had people in Ullapool for nearly a year. It's a tiny little fishing village. And especially during the winter, there is no reason for anyone to be there.
Here, you must be enjoying your stay.
Aye.
So that was the major problem, was actually working up there without arousing the suspicions of the locals. But the prime objective was to follow Weston whenever he came into the UK.
Every day, customs officers stroll through airline passenger lists, looking for a few suspected smugglers among literally thousands of names. It's a job which requires extraordinary patience. But the next time Neil Weston flew into Britain, customs were waiting.
Nice briefcase, sir.
Spanish. Well, you got a better class of leather. Would you like it opened?
Oh, that would be nice.
You're my guest. Sorry it's all so tidy. I'm afraid I'm a wee bit of a control freak.
Well, we've got a few of those in the customs service, sir.
Well, I'm sure you couldn't run it without them. Hasta la vista.
Delta Romeo 1, eyeballing target.
When he arrived at Heathrow or Gatwick, we'd have to try and work out in advance what he would do. Would he hire a car and drive up to Scotland? Would he jump on the shuttle? Would he go on the train? We would try and narrow it down and try and put ourselves in his position.
Liftoff. We have liftoff.
The first time that Weston came into the country and we actually managed to get a surveillance team out and follow him and actually see him meet up with these people, that was great.
Target 1 is stop, stop, stop.
It was all suspicion, based on rumours But to actually see it happen was magnificent. And we knew, once we saw that they would do it again.
Go. Target 1 is meeting Target 2. Repeat. Target 1 is in contact with Target 2.
So the link between Weston and crazy Chris Howarth was now established. But Weston returned to Spain, and the trail went cold. The next development took months, but the wait seemed worthwhile.
We received information that a boat had been purchased by Neil Weston and was lying in Mallorca. Having identified that boat, obviously this was then beginning to fit into our perceived picture of how events would unfold. Always dangerous, but that's how we saw it. And then Howarth was seen at the boat.
It seemed a perfect fit. Who better to sail a boatload of drugs into Scotland than Chris Howarth?
We were convinced they were going to use the Sheerwake, which was in the south of Spain at the time. We had surveillance set up, we had the help of the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, but that turned out to be a red herring, unfortunately.
At this point, 2 new names entered the investigation. Flying into London, apparently returning from the Spanish holiday, were David Forrest and Ian Ray. The customs team suspected that they had been recruited by Neil Weston as part of his drug scam.
Just a moment, please, gentlemen.
Yeah, but we're green.
Yeah, I appreciate that, sir. Random checks, we do them every now and then. Thanks for that, Alan. I'll get you a drink later, yeah?
Well, haven't they got anything?
Of course. Thank you. So, where have you been?
Spain. This is great, isn't it? Catching that train was always going to be tight, but now it's going to be...
Well, this shouldn't take too long, hopefully.
But it would be us, you know, the only ones in a hurry.
We'll make it.
Well, just as you said, gentlemen, everything correct.
Thank you.
Just doing my job.
Forrest and Ray suspected nothing, but they had no idea how much this apparently routine search had revealed.
The result of that was a very vital piece of information in that the examination of their baggage revealed letters which were addressed to Neil Weston's mother, who resided in Scotland.
Just as you said, gentlemen, everything correct.
Thank you.
Just doing my job.
Here we had outright evidence to us that they were associated with Neil Weston, and Forrest and Ray, we felt, were going to be the organisers of the transport and the shore party.
But again, keeping a close watch on these 2 men wasn't going to be easy.
Well, Ray was virtually impossible because he lived in the middle of nowhere. He knew everyone within 20, 30 miles of his house. It was so remote. And we tried to keep a tag on Davy Forrest. He was difficult again because he lived in a huge big council estate in Dundee with lots of different ways in and out.
Another 4 months went by, but there was little customs officers could do but wait.
He's back.
We eventually built up a picture of his movements, so we knew after 4 or 5 times just what he was going to do. Weston was very good at anti-surveillance. He drove very fast. It was always a big, powerful car. So what we had to do was anticipate what he was going to do and have people in advance of him all the time. So we would have a car at Perth and have a car at Dunkeld and another one further up towards Ullapool and try and jump him from one to the other.
Is this him?
It's him. Delta Romeo 3, lift off, follow on target, heading north.
Weston seemed to be heading into the area where Ian Ray lived, and customs officers were finally hoping to confirm their connection. But instead, their entire surveillance operation very nearly ended in disaster.
What do you reckon? Do we risk it? Not exactly peak season in the Cairngorms, is it? Ah, come on. Evening.
There's a fire.
Good to be indoors.
Weston was sitting at the bar, and as soon as we walked in, he looked over, and there was something that just said, he doesn't like us. It was obvious he was asking, who are they? Do you know them? Are they locals?
Thanks, Martin. Just what the doctor ordered.
I think he's clocked us.
I think you're right. It's time to phone home, eh?
No, really, I'm telling you. Take us out or we're going to get burned. Is there not anybody else on? Oh, darling, you know I miss you. Oh, I miss you terrible. Really. I love you. You know I do. Bye.
So, what are you doing round here?
Fishing.
For what?
Fish.
In hindsight, I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't have gone in there. We didn't gain anything from it, as it happens, because Ian Ray wasn't there. All we saw was Weston there.
Red herrings and dead ends were making Operation Klondike an increasingly frustrating business. But Chris Howarth again flew out to Spain. Customs officers expected him to return with the shipment of drugs, but further disappointment was in store.
The trouble with drug smuggling organisations is they never read the script. And we finished up 6 weeks later, still no sign of a boat arriving into the northwest coast of Scotland, no sign of Forrest and Ray heading northwest in order to meet the boat.
Then Customs' worst fears were realised. Crazy Chris Howarth was suddenly back in Ullapool.
Hello, Chris. Been away?
Oh, aye. But I'm back.
You've really caught the sun?
Blue skies all the way, Marge.
Been abroad then?
Oh, yes. Wonders of the world, Marge.
Chris Howarth hadn't flown back into Britain. Customs knew that. Instead, he must have sailed the drugs into Scotland right under their noses.
We were absolutely distraught. It was 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and Chris was in the pub getting drunk, and I was in the pub getting drunk, but for different reasons.
18 months of Operation Klondike, and the pressure was now on for the undercover customs team. They still didn't have the evidence they needed to make any arrests, and even more worrying was a suspicion that another shipment of drugs had got through. With Christmas just around the corner, it was a time for post-mortems.
They're laughing at us. Yeah. All round the building.
Howarth sails back, all la-di-da, with a mountainside of gear. And where were we?
In the back of our minds, we had the suspicion, yeah, it's got to be there. Ray and Forrest haven't moved. It's got to be there. But that was always something to hang on for. But it was still pretty miserable for everyone.
Okay, come on. Ideas. Back to square one. What have we got?
Right. Weston's controlling it from Spain. Crazy Chris has done the boat job.
Yeah, well, tell me something new.
And Forrest and Ray are the shore party.
We don't even know that.
And we've always assumed that. Intelligence tells us that. Well, they haven't moved.
So?
Well, maybe they've landed the drugs, stashed them in a cove somewhere. They just haven't picked them up and driven them away. Why else are Forrest and Ray sitting at home eating mince pies? My guess is the dope's still out there.
It wasn't much of a theory, but it was the best they had. So undercover officers continued to drive past Ian Ray's isolated house as often as they dared. While David Forrest's flat was under more constant surveillance.
3 minutes past 12. Taking over surveillance on target 2, who is still up and about.
It's the festive season, didn't you know? Fun and games.
But once again, the whole operation nearly fell apart.
He should have his head done by now. I mean, what's Forrest doing all this time of night?
Probably watching a horror film. I'll nip round the back and take a gander.
Target 2 is still awake. It's nearly 5 o'clock in the morning. Is he always like this?
No, not in the reports. What's happening?
Not much. The TV's on, the light's on. He's the only one along the balcony still up.
What balcony?
His balcony.
He hasn't got a balcony. He lives on the ground floor.
What?
He's gone. His car's not there. He's gone!
I've been watching the wrong flat. I don't believe this. I think we may have a bit of a problem.
Everybody was tired. We'd been on duty for days. These things happen. But we got it back and set a series of checkpoints around the northwest of Scotland. And every single policeman knew that we were looking for any commercial van in that area. And it was one of the local guys from Ullapool who we had been dealing with for months and who knew what we were after, spotted it.
It seemed that the unlikely theory that the drugs had been landed but not moved on for sale might be right after all. And at last, the deserted Highlands began to work in customs' favour. A new van hired from outside the area was easy to trace and to stop. Inside were Forrest and Ray.
This your van? Why, what's wrong? I didn't say anything was wrong. I asked if it was yours.
What's the problem here? It's rented, officer.
What you got in the back?
Nothing. Just some rubble.
Rubble?
Yeah, we've got some geological samples, officer. We collect them up here to take to London University.
That's interesting. Never heard that one before.
No, honestly, they do analysis on them.
Aye. Open the back, please.
There he goes. Just samples, that's all. Just rock, rubble.
Well, if there's one thing we've plenty of here in the Highlands, it's rock samples.
That's certainly true. You're right.
All the same, gentlemen, I think we may carry out a little analysis of our own.
Get up!
With Forrest and Ray arrested, Chris Howth was taken in for questioning. He didn't go quietly.
Person! I'm not going in there, you've got the wrong person!
Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the suspected cannabis revealed a big surprise.
It was just incredible. We didn't have the slightest inkling at all that it was coke. And to actually open up one tiny little 1 kilo package and find this white powder and then realise that you have another 500 of them, it was just astonishing. It was all between 85 and 95% Colombian cocaine. And it had a street value of about £100 million, so that was a huge, huge quantity. But then it begged the question, where the hell had they been? How had they managed to get this stuff to Scotland, where it had come from? Forrest had told us where he'd picked up this stuff, at a place called Klondike Bay. So we sent about 30 customs and police up to this area to search it.
It's here! Over here!
In fact, the full story of how the cocaine had been smuggled into Scotland would stay a mystery for months, until a ship was seized by Canadian authorities.
We heard from two sources that in fact the boat that had brought the drugs to the UK was a vessel called the DMRB. And these 26 bales of drugs were lowered over the side in a dinghy. The dinghy bashed against the side of the boat a couple of times, and Chris and Noel sailed the drugs to Klondike Bay and hid them. They then should have destroyed the dinghy. They were told to destroy it, but they didn't. And that was their major, major mistake. When we took the samples of paint from the DMRB back to Scotland to compare with what we'd taken both from the dinghy and from the van. They all matched. When we first examined the paperwork from the DMRB, we found Crazy Chris's number, his telephone number in Ullapool, which was just absolutely incredible. And the other thing, which really was the icing on the cake, was that when we had the charts examined by the fingerprinting section at Aberdeen, they found right in the middle of a chart Chris Howarth's fingerprint. It was magnificent evidence, absolutely brilliant. You just couldn't have asked for more.
Chris Howarth was given 25 years. David Forrest, 10 years. Ian Ray got 7 years, and the skipper of the DMRB, Francisco Torres, 30 years.
I think it's probably the best job I've ever been involved in. I think the result was spectacular, but there is always the black spot, which is the fact we never ever did get a hold of Weston. And that was a real blow, that was a sickener, because he was the guy we wanted. And we had a great case against him.
In fact, Neil Weston had been arrested in Spain and was awaiting extradition.
In the case of Neil Weston, our last missing piece of the jigsaw, his escape from custody in Spain was disappointing for the investigation team, but we will meet him again. I don't think he'd be too pleased to meet us, but I think in the fullness of time, that's exactly what will happen.
Hasta la vista.
He'll turn up again and somebody will catch him. And then I'll go and say hi. Do you remember me?